Hello, everyone. My name is Jordyn Smith, and I am the voice and the astrologer for this YouTube channel, Nonconformist Conscience. This is the third installment of the Asteroid Goddess series that I'm doing here on this YouTube channel to help connect us all with more natural, universal, timeless principles. It's like a way that I feel we can archetypally connect more to the undistorted truths that are reflected. And if you've been following along with me, today we are going to go over Themis, who is the asteroid number 24, and she is the goddess of divine order, law, and justice. And when we are speaking of natural law, I love talking about her. To me, she's profound. Just like a side note, before I even got into astrology, I had two um, goddesses tattooed on my arm, one being Pallas Athene and the other being Themis. And I wasn't an astrologer. I wasn't even studying astrology. I just really loved what they represented. And when I became an astrologer, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And what I did is I looked them up in my chart, and lo and behold, they are conjunct in my chart in Aquarius in the 10th house. And they're conjunct on my arm. And I thought that that was just, I love how astrology reflects life, even in very nuanced ways. So without further ado, I am going to share a little bit of some slides in the beginning, but I'm going to structure this a little bit different. I am going to put some of the slides beside me later on during this presentation, just because I'm really wanting to present videos, lectures, teachings in a way that feels more organic. So let me know after you watch this if you like the new way that I'm structuring this or the way that I've been structuring it. And that will really help me out because this isn't just for myself. I do these to help each one of us. Yes, I'm passionate about it, but I know that you all are passionate about asteroid goddesses as well. And I love being a voice to hopefully bring some depth and awareness to them in a way that you can connect with these in a different way. So let's take a look here. So this is, again, the Asteroid Themis, Asteroid 24. She is the goddess of natural justice, order, and divine law. Usually she is seen with scales, a sword, and a blindfold. And the blindfold didn't come later, and I will talk about that in a minute. But I just love this visual of her. She looks so powerful. Before I get into the myth, the archetype, the discovery chart, what I wanted was to share with you all a couple of things for us to connect with her in a way that is connecting us with the cosmos, what we can actually see. So I'm uploading this February 14th. I'm pre-recording this, but on February 14th, whenever I upload this, excuse me, this magenta dot is where Themis is in our cosmos. And she's going to be at 10 degrees, 7 minutes Virgo and retrograde, which is interesting because you'll see in her discovery chart here in a bit that she is in Virgo retrograde as well, but she's at 14 degrees instead of 10. So she's going to have a return soon. And the other thing I wanted to share with you all is just a way for us to connect and really feel into her energy. We can see this is where she's at orbiting the Earth. And of course, you know, the sun is in the center of our solar system. So this is just a nice visual for you to connect with her energy on a different level before I go into the myth and the archetype. So Absolutely love her. She's just so profound. Themis was discovered on April 5th, 1853 in Naples, Italy, by Annabelle de Gasperis. She's a large main belt asteroid between Mars and Jupiter. She's in the outer region of that main belt, and she is one of the largest asteroids and is the largest asteroid of the Themistian family. And the Themistian family is a family of asteroids that are carbaceous. She is roughly the size of Maryland, big. Her orbital period is 5.59 years, and she completes a rotation on her axis every 8.37 hours. So a little bit faster than Earth's rotation on her axis. Instead of 24, it's 8.37. So fascinating to me. In the myth and the archetype, she is the daughter of Uranus, who's known as Heaven, and that is her father, and her mother is Gaia, known as Earth in Greek mythology. And the Romans adopted her as Justia, and there's a little bit of a difference. Justia comes into play during more of a patriarchal time, whereas so there's more patriarchal overlap with Justia. It's why you see Justia known as like Lady Justice within our legal systems. Some people say that she correlates, same with Themis, to the Statue of Liberty, all of these things. But there's I feel that whenever I have dived into the archetype of the Greek versus the Roman mythology, Themis embodies more of the natural principles of this archetype, whereas Justia represents more of the inception of patriarchy. Um, so Themis is known as the personification of justice. In Greek, the word Themis means justice. She was one of the first 12 Titans during the Golden Age, and she's represented as the goddess who upheld all of the natural and all of the laws of natural and divine order during this time period, and consequently through the other ages like the Silver and the Bronze ages. Um, It's really interesting when you're thinking about these ages within Greek mythology. Mythology always, no matter where it's coming from, has threads within different cultures. And when we think about the Golden Age, we're thinking more about more of a matriarchal essence of nomadic times, people rooted within the totality of nature. Even the consensus was rooted in natural law at that time. And then throughout the different ages, moving into the patriarchy, which is more of the Bronze Age, there was, the inception of farming, and then um, owning land, marriage, religion, all of these different dynamics came about. But in the Golden Age, this is more of what we think of natural matriarchal times. This would be about 6,500 BCE, so like pre-religion. Jesus, this was a Greek mythology is like a form of religion if you really think about it. But you see this in other cultures, like even in the indigenous cultures, like the Hopi tribe, or we see it in the Yugas. They all have similar threads of these different ages and what's going on. But this is just within the Greek pantheon. So she was said to inherit her ability of prophecy from her mother, Gaia. And this is interesting to think about because she also, her mom and her established the Order of Delphi. She later on, Themis later on went to give it to her brother Apollo. But this is really indicative of one's ability to tap into natural law and understand and intuit um, things within the present, the past, and in the future. And that is part of this Order of Delphi. Um, she is particularly linked to Sagittarius and Libra, the types of justice. There's natural justice, and the laws within it of giving, sharing, and inclusion. And with the Roman adaptation of her, Justia is more linked to Libra and Capricorn. So it's the shift from the matriarchal to the patriarchal. And again, this propensity to really tap into intuitive, the clairs, whenever one is aligned with natural, timeless principles. So she was the second wife of Zeus, and it's interesting because her and Zeus birthed the Horae and the Moirae. And the Horae and the Moirae um, really represent different types of principles held within natural and universal laws. So, from natural law, there's a birthing of different principles that are also equally natural. And so, what I can say about this, just to really for us to tap into this, the Morai were goddesses who represented the fates. Um, if you've ever watched the Disney movie Hercules, the fates were in it. They were like the three witches. Um, and whenever they went to cut the string of Zeus's life, one of the fates was like, "What's the matter with these scissors?" These are the Morai or Morai. So there's Clotho, the spinner who makes important decisions about birth and death, or coming back from death. She said that she was able to bring some souls back from death. But she always has the spinner. She's weaving the thread. And Lachesis, known as the allotter, is who takes the threads from Clotho and measures them to see the time and life that is allotted for someone, for a soul. And she's also the fate that chooses their destiny and keeps them on track for their destiny. And then Atropos is known as the inevitable. She was the one who had the scissors, who cut the thread at the time someone's life was meant to end. So whenever growth and evolution ceased to exist in that carnation, she would cut the thread. And I forgot to say that Lachesis, the allotter, who measures to see the time and life that is allotted, she has a rod that she uses. So one has a spinner, one has a rod, and one has scissors. That's usually how they're depicted. But then there's the other three daughters, which are the Horae, which they represented the natural cycles of time and the seasons on Earth. They also represented how the rules and laws of humans on Earth were upheld. So Eunomia, she was known as order. She was the goddess of legislation and greener pastures. Dike, known as justice, was the goddess of moral justice and fair judgment. And then Irene was known as peace, and she was the personification of wealth and abundance. And Themis also had one more child. She had the son of Prometheus. So just to kind of further introduce some of the myths, there's many, many stories um, about Themis, but I feel like this one does a really good job of explaining how a lot of these Greek myths are attached to some of the other myths and lores that we find in religion and cultures. So in the Metamorphosis, who was written by the Roman poet Ovid, Themis was the deity that helped Deucalion repopulate the world after the Great Flood or the Great Deluge wiped out the world's population. And the reason why this flood happened, again, you're going to connect this to familiar myths and lores, is that Zeus sent this flood in hopes of bringing an end to the Bronze Age. And this is because the Titans were really tired of the hubris of men. And so, with the help of Prometheus, who was again Themis' son, Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha, they were spared as they built a chest filled with different things that would help them to survive this flood that lasted 9 days. And so after the flood ended, with every human being dead except for Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha, um, they needed to repopulate the world. And so they went to Themis to ask for advice, like, how do we do this? And how do we survive? And she said that they needed to cover their heads and throw the bones of their mother over their shoulders. And the bones of their mother is really this reflection in a more poetic way of Themis referring to the rocks or the minerals of Earth, because the mother, Gaia. Um, Anyway, so the rocks symbolize the bones of Gaia. And Deucalion and Pyrrha, they listened to Themis and they covered their heads, and each one of them took turns throwing the rocks over their heads. And whenever Deucalion threw rocks over his head, they turned into men. And whenever Pyrrha threw rocks over her head, they turned into women. And so this is how the world was repopulated. Fascinating if you're really thinking about what and how this correlates to other lore. So a couple of things that are notable mentions is that Themis had the profound ability to counsel and uphold these natural laws that were timeless and universal. And she did it through a benevolent and compassionate disposition. Whereas she has a counterpart, Nemesis, who was about divine retribution through order. So whenever humans did not listen to Themis' gentle approach around upholding balance and order in a natural sense, Nemesis would come in and the humans would feel her wrath because they did not heed the advice and the wisdom of compassionate Themis. I even think about what's going on in the world now, and it's very interesting for me to ponder upon this. But Themis is usually seen with a sword because this is indicating the archetype of being able to cut through to the truth. She's also usually depicted with scales, which is about bringing balance and order and harmony through divine law. And she's occasionally depicted with a blindfold, but this didn't come until around 16 AD. And she's also often depicted in nature, which is reflective of, natural law. So rich with archetypes here. So if we are thinking about how this can show up in someone's chart if it's really pronounced, this is where one can tap into natural law and recover it. They can have a strong disposition of justice. They can be someone who has a strong understanding of natural values and how to improve upon where there's been distortions of those natural values and laws. It's where one can utilize their voice to help balance the scales of natural law, to combat distortions, especially stemming from distorted beliefs and values. So thinking that a value and a belief is a truth when actually it is a distortion of natural law. It is not a truth. It's where one can see a vision for the future to be of service. It's where one could possibly be a person who plants seeds to restore natural order through understanding natural laws. It's someone who has the ability to recover a different way to relate to oneself through what is timeless, universal, and natural. This is really on par with a lot of the astrology going on right now, too, with Venus and Aries about to retrograde and all of the Pisces dynamics. But it's also the ability to throw off old thinking and distorted beliefs that are not rooted in truth. So again, the ability to recover natural truths as one throws those off. It's a natural inclination for justice. It's an ability to liberate from distortions of natural laws that have affected their interrelationship to self. And it's the ability to create action in the face of injustice, to speak up, to speak out, to teach, to continue to learn, and to continue to recover. Typically see these souls that have this very strong placement, depending where it's at in their chart by house or sign, and the aspects that it's making. This can really show where they can show up in the world to create balance and restore divine order and law, the trials and the tribulations that they go through, where also distortions have impeded upon them understanding themselves, and relating to themselves in a natural way. You often see someone who has a strong Themis, has seen different social dynamics go down in different lifetimes that have really created trauma for them. And so oftentimes they will use these past life experiences to do something different in this lifetime. So the collective archetypes, like through transits, the collective can experience or re-experience extremes pertaining to imbalances as a direct result of not taking care of the earth and its resources, or through seeing war play out that is a direct result of self-interest dealing with resources, so land, minerals, food, water. Um, it's the ability to recover on a collective level natural values and restabilize order through recovering these natural values. And it's where we can experience collective disillusionment from distortive beliefs or giving meaning to false leadership that really is not rooted in divine order of giving, sharing, and inclusion, but is exclusionary and self-interest, but could appear not that way. They could appear like a savior at first, that they're coming to help. You see this time and time again with different leaders who've come into power who end up being demagogues. Is there's some type of, I mean, it's fascinating to really understand this. There's some type of trauma going on within a collective or within a society or a government or a nation where survival is becoming very hard. And the survival is becoming really hard because of the ways in which resources are shared or delegated. And it's where like we've seen different times where like the Great Depression and the powers that be who came into power at that time. You go back in history and you look at all of this, if you track where Themis was, wow. Too much to show for this, but this is about planting a seed for you to do your own research. But you will see through those transits that when someone comes into power, it's because there's a crisis going on around survival on some level. Inflation, famine, you name it. And there's someone who comes in who has a lot of hubris, but is portraying themselves as being a savior, that they're going to help the collective of that community or society or a nation. And what they end up doing is it gets revealed that this person is absolutely rooted in the distortions of natural law and is rooted in self-interest and exclusion and creates division. And then you always see kind of this nemesis component start to happen where there is a lot of wrath and retribution that ends up happening, and then there's a downfall. It's linked to the myth. Just think about it from what I was talking about. But during these times, there's always a really profound Themis transit leading up to this occurring, trying to beckon the people to do what's right whenever it comes to natural divine law and order and values and relating to each other. And it's like somehow it misses the mark, and then it's just chaos for a while. And then these leaders that come into power, they end up being demagogues, and then it's like we experience this, the counterpart of Themis, which is Nemesis. Very interesting. So and then that's whenever you see people with a strong Themis in their chart trying to do something about it, especially if they have Astrea really strong in their chart too, which eventually I will go over Astrea as well. But what I want to do now is I want to go over the discovery chart with you all. So Themis is at 14 degrees Virgo retrograde, ruled by Mercury retrograde in Aries. We've got Pluto in Taurus at 0 degrees. We have Themis square the nodes, with the resolution being this north node, which is also, both are ruled by Mercury. Then we also have Neptune and Pisces square the nodes, with the resolution being that south node. Jupiter, the south node's ruler, is trine to Mercury. Then, I'm gonna clear this for you all. Then we also have a new phase conjunction with Uranus and Saturn. We also have a new phase conjunction with Uranus and Pluto. All of this being ruled by Venus in Aries, and a new phase conjunction to Mars in Aries. And lastly, Themis is trining Saturn, opposing Neptune, and Neptune is sextile to Saturn. Then we have the south node of Themis, 15 degrees, 3 minutes in Scorpio, sextile to Themis, trining Neptune, ruled by Pluto. And the south node's ruler Pluto is conjunct the north node of Themis, which is semi-sextile to Mars, which is in a new phase conjunction to Venus, the ruler of the north node, and Pluto. So, what does this mean? So fascinating. So whenever we're really wanting to break this chart down around what does this mean, how does this discovery chart of Themis relate? How can we use her discovery chart? Well, it's rich with the archetypes that were in the myth, things around survival, values, law, order, natural law, timelessness. It's all held within this discovery chart, but in true EA fashion, let's start with Pluto and Taurus. Again, I don't know the time that she was discovered, so we're just going to have to go by the aspects and then the signs that the planets and Themis are in the notes. But Pluto and Taurus, what is this correlating with? As a bottom line, it's where, in a true Plutonian way, we're being confronted with who we are, who we aren't, who we can't be, and on a collective level, revolving around how do we survive, Taurus. And how we survive is based upon our values and our needs that we identify, but also the ways in which we utilize our resources, which is another Taurus dynamic. And Venus rules Pluto. And Venus is in Aries, and she is conjunct in a new phase to her ruler, Mars, also in Aries. So there's this need for us to act on the desires to confront the ways in which we have survived up until this point, and then to initiate a new way of relating to the survival instinct. And with Uranus and a new phase to Pluto, this is really speaking to this initiatory process of meaning to liberate from where we've over-identified with certain ways in which we value resources that could actually be inducing trauma, Uranus. Trauma for Gaia, the land, Taurus, trauma for others, the community, Uranus. And then we have Saturn in a new phase, not just to Uranus, but also to Pluto, and is also ruled by that Venus in Aries. And so it's really looking at the ways in which we've structured societies and our communities and through what we value and what we need and how we are meant to survive. And is this actually natural? Something that clues us in around this really reflecting the archetype of distortions of natural order, law, and justice is not just for humans, but for entire species, everything. You've got to remember, the mother of Themis was Gaia. That correlates with Taurus, the land, Earth. Earth is Taurus. But the south node in this chart, the lunar south node, is in Sagittarius, and its ruler Jupiter is conjunct that south node. And so there's a lot of natural law, Sag, that we are meant to understand and recover, but we must dissolve old delusional beliefs. Neptune and Pisces square to that south node that are perpetuating crisis, and that is seen with Neptune opposing Themis in the sign of Virgo, where delusional beliefs about how we utilize resources, how we give, how we share, these natural timeless laws are actually perpetuating crisis and also trauma. And that is seen with Themis trining Saturn and Uranus. Trauma within the ways we've structured things, within the ways in which we utilize resources. It's restated over and over and over again. And Themis is actually square the nodes, with the resolution being that north node in Gemini. And Themis is in Virgo, and she is retrograde. There's something that we're meant to recover, but we're having to re-experience crisis, the same crisis that we're spoken about in the myth. And how we are actually meant to recover knowledge, north node, ruled by Mercury and Aries retrograde. We are meant to throw off how we've logically, Mercury, classified different dynamics, speaking to how we utilize resources, how we structure societies and communities. And we're actually, with a Mercury retrograde, meant to tap more into that Jupiterian function of intuition. We're supposed to be improving upon our intuition to throw off past knowledge, Mercury retrograde and Aries, in order for us to then be able to improve upon the knowledge that we're recovering. That helps us to be good stewards, Virgo, of Earth, of Gaia, and how that creates natural balance and harmony, order, and law, not just between people, but with all species. And there's this dynamic with Themis and Virgo, the need to purge these old dynamics that have created war and separation, stemming from self-interest, and that is seen with this Mercury in Aries. And so, um, with Themis, you know, trining Saturn, it's approving upon the ways in which we structure society and how we value and who we give to and how we show up. And it's about coming up with solutions to purge the old past values while recovering natural values. It's about analyzing the intake of all the information and just objectifying Uranus conjunct Pluto. What is actually going on? What is being perpetuated here? And Themis is like crisis, Virgo. Let's purge this. And we need to remember that in the myth that Themis was benevolent, which is a Jupiter-Sag dynamic. She was also very compassionate, which is a Neptune dynamic. And Neptune is in Pisces, and Neptune is square the nodes with her resolution being the South node in Sag. So there's a need for us to remember that the way to create divine law, order, and justice is through actually tapping into being benevolent and compassionate, not just with the human species, but with all species, because we each have a specific function that is just as equal as the other. And that is a Neptunian, Piscean, timeless, universal principle. And, you know, the south node of Themis is in Scorpio, and it's ruled by that Pluto. And that south node of Scorpio is trining Neptune and sextile Themis. Trines and sextiles can be really great. They can, if you consciously work with them, if we were to on a collective level, it would help us to metamorphose, going from one way of structuring society and the world, our communities, to restructuring it where it is aligned with natural law. But that sextile and those trines are really speaking to, with that south node in Scorpio, from Themis to Neptune, where we have become really comfortable and we're scorpionically resisting because we feel power and the ways in which we are continuing to perpetuate crisis and delusions around natural law, divine order, and justice. And there's a need for us to confront this around, are we really going to be like this? Is this really who we are? Or we're absolutely not going to be like this anymore. And whenever we choose on a collective level to do something different, that's when the metamorphosis can come through purging the old distortions of natural divine law, Themis, Virgo, and then tapping into universal and timeless principles with that Neptune trining, that south node in Scorpio, Themis is south node. And then what that really does is the north node and Taurus conjunct Pluto is it helps us metamorphose the ways in which we relate to others, especially within community. That north node is also conjunct Uranus. And then that helps us to transform the ways in which we structure society through the laws, the taboos, the social norms, Saturn, by getting back in touch with natural values and needs, Taurus. But that is all ruled by Venus and Aries. We're needing to really initiate a different way of relating to everyone and everything here, and to have the courage to liberate from these distortions and to really tap back into Neptune being the higher octave of Venus, transcending the old limitations around how we relate to others, which perpetuates self-interest, distortions, delusions, illusions, disillusionment, crisis. And if we were to tap into Neptune as the higher octave of Venus, we would be initiating a new way to relate to each other, that's actually in alignment with compassion and love and unconditional love. We would find new ways to share resources and to take care of the resources that we have here. We can even look at this in a social justice way, how there have been distorted beliefs that perpetuate divisions within different types of social structures and cultures. Culture is a Sag dynamic, and how the people have creative divisiveness within social structures based upon different social constructs that we value, which is like race and culture and borders. And it's really about us needing to tap into, with Neptune, sextile Saturn, dissolving these old borders and limitations and boundaries, and understanding that we're all interconnected and that we should all have love and compassion for each other. And so you can see that with all that's going on in the discovery chart, it's even speaking to, yes, the myth and what happened, but also what's going on right now in the world. And Themis is going to have her return, you know, here after a while, once she stations direct. I will look that up and put it in the description for you all. But yeah, this is just a profound asteroid that is really speaking for us to purge the past, Virgo, Themis and Virgo, to recover the ability to be good stewards, and through showing up, through creating action to do so, and tapping into our intuition that connects us with nature herself, with Gaia. And that Pluto-Uranus conjunction is also about, I mean, it's, the South Node is technically trining Pluto as well. Same with Mercury retrograde. Again, needing to tap into the intuition, Sag, but it's when we utilize natural law, the best way to do it is through observation and correlation, and that is a Uranian function. So we can really see that there's this need for the collective to individuate through throwing off the ways in which we've related to each other in the past, the values, and the ways in which we have been able to survive that are actually distortions, and that there needs to be more humanitarian efforts, or else Nemesis is gonna come a knocking even more. So I hope that helps you to connect with this archetype. I would love for you all to comment. Of course, you can always tell me where your own Themis is. And until the next time, I will see you later.